Nobody saw all four names coming at the same time. One trade? In May? Unusual, but manageable. Two players moved in a single deal. The league would talk about it for a week. But four names. For roster spots. For contracts, all announced within the same 24-hour window. That wasn't roster management. That was reconstruction. And when the names attached to those moves started circulating through clubhouses, front offices, and broadcast booths across the league, the reaction wasn't confusion. It was silence. The kind of silence that only comes when something genuinely unexpected has happened. When the people who follow this sport for a living, who pride themselves on seeing moves before they happen, who read the signals and track the rumors and connect the dots weeks in advance, when those people go quiet, you know the ground has shifted beneath everyone's feet. The Dodgers GM didn't leak this one. He didn't let it breathe through anonymous sources or convenient whispers. He made the announcement himself. Directly. Cleanly. Four players. One decision. Effective immediately. And at the center of it all, as he almost always is when the Dodgers make a move of this magnitude, was the name that changes the calculation of everything around it. Shohei Ohtani. To understand why four players moved at once, you have to understand what the Dodgers front office has been watching since spring training. Not just statistics. Not just performance metrics. Something harder to quantify but impossible to ignore once you've seen it. Chemistry. Or more precisely, the absence of. They have to operate from the same set of unspoken agreements about what this team is, what it demands, and what it refuses to tolerate. When that invisible trust breaks down, even partially, even in corners of the room that management isn't supposed to see, the people at the top of a well-run organization notice. They may not act immediately. But they watch. They take note. And eventually, when the right moment arrives, they move. The right moment arrived this week. The first name on the list surprised almost no one who had been paying attention. Rushing. His situation had been deteriorating quietly for weeks. The incident involving Ohtani, the words spoken in a space where words carry weight, had already put him on the wrong side of a line that Roberts had made clear, in his own measured way, was not negotiable. The trade itself had been building. What surprised people wasn't that Rushing was moved. It was that his name appeared alongside three others simultaneously. That detail transformed a personnel decision into a statement. The GM was not just solving one problem. He was resetting a dynamic. The second name hit harder. Kim Hye-sung. Here is where the room, both literally and figuratively, went very still. Because Kim had not been a problem. Kim had been, by almost every available measure, the opposite of a problem. He had been the conscience of that clubhouse. The voice that spoke when others stayed quiet. The player who stood in front of Ohtani, not because anyone asked him to, but because he understood instinctively what the moment required. So why was Kim on the trade list? The answer, when it finally emerged through the careful language of the official announcement, was both simpler and more complicated than anyone expected. Kim had requested it. Not loudly. Not dramatically. In the quiet, deliberate way that defines everything he does. He had walked into the GM's office, sat down across the desk, and told the truth. I think it's time for me to go somewhere I can grow differently. That was it. No grievance. No ultimatum. Just clarity. The GM had listened. And then, because this is a front office that understands that holding a player against his will is its own kind of damage, he had honored the request. The third name was Smith. Smith's inclusion in the trade package was the most straightforwardly transactional of the four. His numbers had been sliding since mid-April. His defensive positioning had drawn quiet criticism from the coaching staff for the better part of 2 months. And from a contract perspective, moving Smith created flexibility, the kind of financial room that a front office only clears when it already knows what it plans to do with the space. That detail became significant very quickly. Because the fourth announcement wasn't a departure. It was an arrival. The Dodgers had signed a new catcher. Hakana Otani. The name stopped people mid-sentence. Mid-broadcast. Mid-scroll through their phones at whatever hour of the morning the announcement dropped in their time zone. Because the name carried an obvious weight that went beyond the position or the contract or the roster implications. Hakana Otani. For those who needed confirmation, yes. The connection to Shohei Ohtani is exactly what it appears to be. And that connection, once the initial wave of reaction settled, became the lens through which the trade of 4 players. The financial flexibility created by moving Smith. The deliberate timing of an announcement that arrived as a single package rather than a series of incremental moves. None of it looked accidental anymore. None of it looked reactive. It looked, instead, like the closing move in a sequence that had been planned carefully and executed at precisely the right moment. The GM had not been reacting to a clubhouse problem. He had been preparing for an addition. And everything else, rushing, Kim, Smith, had been the architecture of making room. The press conference that followed was unlike most press conferences. The GM walked in without notes. He stood at the podium rather than sitting. And he began not with the trades but with what he called a statement of direction. Those 2 words, statement of direction, had never appeared in a Dodgers press conference before. Several reporters noted it immediately. He spoke for about 4 minutes before taking questions. And in those 4 minutes, he said several things that will be analyzed and debated for the rest of this season. He said that the trades were not punitive. He said they were not the result of any single incident or conversation. He said that roster construction at this level requires the willingness to make difficult decisions in service of a larger vision, and that a larger vision, by definition, sometimes asks more of you than a smaller one would. Then he said something that made the room shift. We are building something here that has not been built before. Not in this. Was the signing of Hakana Otani the centerpiece of this announcement? The GM didn't hesitate. Every piece of this announcement is the centerpiece. That's the point. Another reporter asked about Kim Hye-sung specifically. Given his standing in the clubhouse, given what he had represented for this team both on the field and in terms of character, how did the front office reconcile moving a player of that profile alongside players who had been moved for very different reasons? The GM took a breath. Kim came to us. I want to be clear about that. Kim made a request that reflected the same kind of self-awareness and professionalism that he has brought to everything he has done in a Dodgers uniform. We honored that request because we respect him. Because respecting a player means listening to them when they tell you what they need, not just when it's convenient for you. He paused. Kim Hye-sung is going to do remarkable things in Detroit. I would bet on it. And we are going to miss him in ways that won't show up in any box score. In Detroit, the reception was immediate and warm. The Tigers had been quietly building towards something of their own. Their front office had been patient, methodically acquiring players with character as deliberately as they acquired players with talent, operating on the belief that the 2 things are not separate considerations but the same consideration viewed from different angles. Kim, rushing, and Smith arriving together gave Detroit a different kind of headline than they were used to generating. But within the Tigers clubhouse, the reaction was grounded. Practical. Focused on what the pieces meant for the games ahead rather than the story they created around them. Kim himself issued a short statement. It read, in full. I am grateful for everything Los Angeles gave me. I am excited for what comes next. I will work. 4 sentences. No elaboration. Perfectly him. Back in Los Angeles, attention turned quickly to Hakana Otani. The questions were inevitable and understandable. What does it mean to share a clubhouse, and a last name, with the most scrutinized player in baseball? How does a new signing navigate the weight of that association? What does the front office expect from a catcher arriving into a situation this charged? The GM addressed it with characteristic directness. Hakana earned this. Full stop. This is not a storyline acquisition. This is not a marketing decision. We evaluated him on his merits, on his defense, on his game calling, on his leadership behind the plate. The last name is incidental to every single criterion we used. He said it once. He didn't repeat it. He moved on. But the question of what Hakana's arrival means for Shohei, for the dynamic in that dugout, for the energy in that clubhouse, for the way this Dodgers team carries itself through the remaining months of the season, that question is not going away. Shohei Ohtani, asked about the announcement during a brief session with reporters, responded the way he almost always responds to things that happen around him rather than to him. Calmly. Thoughtfully. Without performing any particular emotion. I think the organization makes decisions based on what they believe is best for this team. I trust that process. I've trusted it since I got here. A reporter pressed him. Was he consulted about any part? Another reporter, sensing an opening, asked directly about Hakana. For just a moment, the briefest flicker, something shifted in Ohtani's expression. Not quite a smile. Something closer to a quiet recognition. Like a door opening just slightly before closing again. I think he's going to be a very good fit here, he said. I think people are going to see that quickly. That was all. But sometimes, in the particular language that Ohtani speaks, careful, understated, measured to the exact degree required, that is everything. 4 players moved. 1 player signed. One announcement that landed like a stone dropped into still water, the ripples spreading outward in every direction at once. The Dodgers are not the same team they were 48 hours ago. The Tigers are not the same team they were 48 hours ago. And somewhere in the mathematics of all these moving pieces, in the space created by the departures, in the possibilities opened by the arrival, in the quiet confidence of a front office that clearly knew exactly what it was doing before anyone else knew anything at all, a new shape is beginning to emerge. What that shape becomes over the next 4 months is the question that will define this season. But if the last 48 hours have shown anything, it is this: in Los Angeles, nothing happens by accident. Every move connects to the next one. Every departure makes room for something. And the something they just made room for carries a name that this city, and this league, is only beginning to understand.